Good morning. Welcome to Writers on the River. I'm Jennifer Stewart. I'm the administrator with the Vancouver Arts Council. I'd like to say thank you to Save at Home Manitoba for their funds and support in the creation of this program. This morning, we have author Verla Fortier, who is going to read off all her accreditations here, and hopefully I get them all right. Verla is a retired professor of nursing. She is an author and she's the host of Your Outside Mindset podcast. In her book, Take Back Your Outside Mindset, Verla shares the simple antidote for bringing control back to your life, from practical tips to live longer, prevent dementia, and chronic and control your chronic illness by living or going outside to spend time close to trees, shrubs, and plants. I don't think I need to say any more than that. I'm interested and I'm ready to be listening. So have you had your cup of tea and enjoy Verla. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Verla.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Um, well, what would you think if I told you that spending 20 minutes a day outside close to grass, trees, and shrubs would, as Jennifer said, make you live longer, prevent dementia, and control your chronic illness if you have one? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you about today in my 20 minutes. The story starts when I had just retired as a professor of nursing from McMaster University. And I was really looking forward to retiring from Ontario to Pine Falls, Manitoba, my little hometown. I could just picture it. I'd be swimming in Lake Winnipeg and lying on the warm white sand with friends and family, laughing and just having fun. Or I'd be walking in the bush or on the trails or cross-country skiing. I had it all mapped out. I'd sold my house. The kids were launched. My bags were packed. And then just before I left, in what was to be a routine doctor's appointment, turned into my diagnosis of serious systemic lupus. Um, this is an autoimmune disease that can go pretty quickly to your heart, lungs, and kidneys. I was told that it was a chronic disease, no cure, of course, and started on the typical medication, hydroxychloroquine, Plaquenil, to control the whole body, or not control, but minimize the whole body inflammation. And the one piece of advice I got from my doctor was to avoid the sun. So can you imagine how I felt at that moment? um, all my retirement dreams were scuttled, my plans. I did end up moving back to Pine Falls, and instead of connecting with friends and family, I ended up staying inside, feeling like a prisoner in my own home. I wasn't well and I got sicker. I joined a lot of online lupus support groups around the world, and they spent my time mostly scrolling through comments. The comments were lovely. They were kind. People were mostly sending prayers to one another. But it was sad. And on the going outside piece, we all agreed that we felt like vampires because we'd all been given the same information to avoid the sun. The light just went out of my life. I spent a year living like this until something changed. And that was a comment from an online one of these members who had lupus, and her picture looked pretty good. And she said, I go outside whenever I want. I don't worry about it. I just put on a hat and sunscreen and off I go. I thought, what? Who is her doctor and what have I been doing? And I was angry. So it was full noon. I grabbed a hat and slapped on some sunscreen and then walked out to my yard and then just kept walking and walking for hours. And the longer I walked, the better I felt. In fact, I felt amazing. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, what happened out there changed and I believe actually saved my life. So this became kind of a calling for me, and I'm not a calling type of person at all, but I wanted to do more with this. So I took a sharp left turn into green space research, something that I had heard nothing about in my 40-year career in healthcare, nothing. And as I looked, I just saw more and more research from researchers around the world, and they were showing that being outside close to grass, trees, and shrubs prevents and even treats all disease. So I just helped me, as I say, so much that I thought, wow, if it's helped me, then I got to get this word out because it doesn't seem to be out there. And hello, it's people know how to do this. It's free. You can do it anywhere, anytime. So I began my green space research journey with Diana Beresford Kroger. She's world recognized Canadian who does all university peer reviewed research. And she combines this with indigenous, traditional, ancient knowledge. And I opened my book with a quote from her. She says, "The atmosphere around trees may be the most powerful natural medicine we have access to, yet most of us are completely unaware of it." And how she explains this in such a good way is that because trees can't run away, they have their own defense system to keep bugs away and other predators. And what they do is they produce these aerosols, these health giving aerosols that you can't see, they're invisible, but they drift down from the tops of trees. And they are antiseptic, antibiotic, antiviral, and anti inflammatory. And so Diana Beresford Kroger says all we have to do is just be around trees, lollygag around them, and we get these huge benefits. And she reminds us that 64% of all of our medicines come from trees. And she just showed me new relationships, new vital relationships of my life with trees. And she seemed to say to me, yes, there'll be dark and difficult times, but I felt like she was kind of taking me by the hand and saying, but you can experience beautiful things. And what she did and her work did was help me face these kind of fears. There were three big fears that I didn't want to talk to anybody about, that were a little irrational, but I thought I'm going for it. And so the first one was dying too soon. The second was getting dementia. My mother had dementia. And the third was that lupus was going to take over my life. And my dad had MS, multiple sclerosis. So I'll talk to each one of those in turn. The first is living longer. So I went in knowing that each chronic disease we have shaves about 3 years off our lifespan. And it made sense that lupus, because it's a cluster of disease, would shave off 22 years. So we live 22 years less than the normal population. I went to the green space research, and these were studies of tons of people, millions and millions of people, national studies. So at UNB, right across Canada, and at Harvard, right through the United States. And what they both showed was that if you live within a 15-minute walk of grass, trees, and shrubs, you live 12% longer. So that is 10 years roughly more. And I was so excited by this that I planted a garden for the first time in a long time. I joined a fitness class so I could be fit for all these extra years of love and hugs and travel, whatever I wanted to do. So I was completely buoyed up by that. And since then, the research shows that even if you don't live within a 15-minute walk, of green space, as long as you get there for 2 hours a week in any time combination, you get the same health benefits. So then I turned to dementia, and the first study I found was at Stanford University, Gregory Bratman, and he and his team were looking at this, labeling this type of thinking called negative rumination. And this is something I had heard nothing about, but it's a type of thinking that uh, starts with the phrase, like, if you're worried about the future, it's what if. If you're worried about the past, it's if only. If you're stuck in the present, it's why is this happening to me, or that type of thing. And it's thinking that circles around like a broken record into the part of the brain that I think of as the heartbreak hotel. It's actually the emotional regulation center of the brain. So what he showed was that 20 minutes outside, and this was in a city area close to grass, trees, and shrubs, takes away this negative rumination, just takes it away just by being there. And then I looked further and found research across the world that was clear evidence that when we go outside into green space, it improves our working memory. It improves our long-term memory, our short-term memory, our ability to concentrate, our ability to learn new things, and to problem solve. So when we think of dementia now, we are actually clearing our mind and building cognitive reserves. So this, when I found that, I thought, oh, I'm going to call this How I Feel Outside, which was completely free and relieved. I felt like I was a kid again. And I called this my outside mindset. And what I did was I kept doing research on this, what things I could add on when I'm out there to even make it better. And one of those things is Professor Ellen Langer at Harvard University. She has these noticing studies, and she says if we simply notice new things in something we think we already know all about, so noticing something new and something old, this puts us in the present and it's enlivening. And just like the research that says when you go outside, people are more attracted to you when you're outside and you're more attracted to them, and problem solving becomes easier. So I added that on, and I found that just noticing was really pretty easy when I was out there, because when we're outside, we pay attention differently. So when we're looking at the computer or we're driving, we've got this direct attention taking place. But if when we're outside, it's indirect attention. So our attention and our vision wanders around and sort of softly focuses here and there, and that rests the brain. And the name in science is attention restoration theory. And this is actually what happens. You're restoring your brain. So this was good news and continues to be good news. And at this point, and you may be wondering, as I was too, is how it can't be all tree aerosols. How in the world is all this happening? And they don't really know how it happens. There's a lot of what, but one way that really explains beautifully, one way that mechanism that this happens is fractals. And the person who does the best research on this and is world renowned is Professor Richard Taylor out of the University of Oregon. And he is a nanophysicist. And what he says is fractals is just a weird name for naturally occurring patterns in nature that are everywhere. And he says how to describe fractals is when you're standing away from a tree and you might see the shape of the tree and the tree trunk. So you move in closer and you'll see the shape, the pattern of the branches. And then you move in a little closer and you'll see the pattern of the branches and the twigs. And he says every time we move closer, it's the same pattern, but at a different scale. So I've got a balsam, I've got a prop. So here's a balsam twig. And you can see, I don't know if you can catch that, but you can see that the patterns are exactly the same and decreasing in scale as they go up to the top. And then here's another smaller one. And again, it's exactly the same pattern and gets smaller and smaller. So this simply looking at these fractal patterns, says Taylor, and his research proves this out, floods our emotions and floods our body with stress reduction up to 60%. And when we're doing this, that floods all the way through our body and relaxes our body by that same amount. And he says our eyes are thirsty for fractals. So because our eyes have evolved with fractal patterns everywhere, it's like our eyes kind of wake up and say, hey, this is what I meant to be looking at. And that's sort of why, but just such an interesting way of looking at that. So look for fractal patterns. And by the way, you don't have to stare at them. You can just, even if you're passing by a window and there's fractal patterns in there, you're still getting the benefit. So you just glimpses or sideways glances of fractals. So that brings me to the third thing, which is my chronic illness. When we're suffering, we know it. When we're in pain or tired, our attention goes there like a magnet. And it's just what happens. It goes right into our body. So I didn't know what I'd find on this, but the research I like, one of my favorites, is from Professor Richard Mitchell at University of Glasgow. And he says his research shows definitely that when we are outside for 5 minutes, our self-esteem goes up. So it goes up. And then other research shows that if our self-esteem is up, our symptoms like pain, shortness of breath go down. And then the opposite is true. So simply by going outside, we're decreasing our symptoms. And the same Ellen Langer that does these noticing studies that I use for when I go outside, she does these symptom variability studies. And what she does in her studies is she asks people with chronic illness, how are you feeling now? How are you feeling now? Like they call them at home. And she says that noticing how we feel is good for us. And I do this. I take it outside. So I have rheumatoid arthritis, a bunch of other stuff. So when so I go out and I say, okay, I notice that I've got pain in my left shoulder today and in my right hip. I'm just going to let that be. And then in 10 minutes, I'm going to check in and see how it's doing. So every time I check in, it's good. It's gone. And I can't believe it. It's like magic. And then I tell myself, it's gone. And Langer says that health requires noticing when we feel better. And I like that. Some people have asked when I give these talks how I'm doing and do I still take medication and all that. Yes, I still take the medication. And my blood work is pretty well unchanged. It's still on the very serious side. And I have the worst type of lupus, but my symptoms are fine. I mean, I am in control. I feel good. I'm doing this kind of work, going out and writing books and talking to people. And it's given me real control. And I know that you can get this kind of control too. So just in closing, at the back of my book, I have a little acronym that spells control. So I'll just spell that out and what those different letters stand for. For this is the control that you can get. And so remember that. So C is for count the minutes that you go outside. Every minute counts. O is for outside spaces. Now, this could be simply a tree or standing out on a balcony in a city and looking up at the sky. Anything small. So think of those in terms of outside spaces. N is for noticing new things. T is for tree aerosols that drift down from the treetops. R is for respiration. So try to get close to that tree and breathe in through your nose. And when you do, it'll act like a medication. It'll go straight through your blood-brain barrier, right into your brain. And you'll get all the benefits there. O again is for outstanding, and give yourself a hug for getting outside. It's tough to do in our world. It's really tough, and I find it tough every day. So give yourself a hug and tell yourself you're outstanding. L is look for fractals. They are everywhere. They're in cloud formations, grass, flowers, seashells, shorelines, lightning, anything in nature. Once you start looking, you'll find a naturally occurring pattern and think about what it's doing for you there. So if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from my talk today, it's that if you do decide to spend 20 minutes a day outside or 2 hours a week outside, close to grass, trees, and shrubs, you will live longer. You will prevent dementia, and you will control your chronic illness. All you have to do is get yourself there. And as soon as you do, you are going to feel better about yourself and your world around you. And this is a good thing because we all need a little more of your outside mindset. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Verla. That was really, really interesting. I'm very, very interesting. Again, this has been a great informative session for me too. Where is your book available if someone is interested in finding it?
Oh, it's on Amazon. Yeah.
And your podcast?
It's also at McNally Robinson if people don't go there.
And your podcast, where can people find that?
Oh, yeah. Back to my book. There's a book and a workbook. So if you don't want my whole story in there, you can just take the workbook and fill in that. My podcast is on any, once you figure out the whole podcast world, it's on every platform. So Apple and everything. And it's called Your Outside Mindset. And I actually have really great interviews with the people that I talked about. So Diana Beresford Kroger, I don't have, she's podcast episode 18, I think. So she's the one the tree aerosol person. Oh no, she's episode 22. And Richard Taylor on fractals, I got him. I couldn't believe I got these people, is 18. And so those are, and it's just amazing who you can get to talk to on these podcasts. And so I use it as a professional help. They help me.
No, I'm going to go and add those to my list now too for podcasts. So thank you very much for participating. Again, thank you to the Safe at Home Manitoba program. I hope everyone stays warm today and stay safe and stay home. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for this opportunity.